This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known. So, welcome to the Math Map Book Club, where Chrissy Gilpin and I discuss a lesson a week from the Math Map, our curriculum for classical conversations, students enrolled in communities. Today is April 30th, 2025, and we are playing games, and I think I'm really happy to invite Jill Philbrick to jump in a little bit, but I believe Kirsty's the one that's going to start us off. Am I right?
So I'm just going to get us started, and then Jill is actually up first. For those of you who have not attended one of our summer book clubs before, just a reminder, we are looking at the games and activities from the back of the booklets, 2 booklets per week. And we have invited our mentor tutors, Jill and Babs, to help us go through these activities and share their experiences and insights with you. We're going to look at the published instructions and then also just explore adaptations. And it's been really exciting to see how many ideas we've gathered from all of us, not just from our mentor tutors, but from everybody who is attending our calls and sharing their ideas for using these games and activities with different age groups and different groups of students. And of course, at the end, if you have questions about the math map or about any of the lessons, we will have time to answer those. So with that said, I will mute myself and turn this over to Jill, who is going to talk about foxes and geese.
Okay, so this was a new game to me. I had never played it before, but my class liked it, and we were in the very first pilot year with this, and so I even made it on giant poster board and brought it in for them to do like during lunch so that they could kind of manipulate it and play with it. And they did, they enjoyed it. So once you get the hang of it. So I made one on my booklet, and I used Post-its because coins fall off when you hold them vertically. So, so I used Post-its because if you see here on the direction to start, the first player will be in charge of the geese, and you will place 24 pennies on all those black intersection dots. Okay, so that's what you see I have done with my Post-its. Okay, those are the yellow ones. And then the second player will be in charge of the foxes, and they place 2 dimes inside the barn. I used the darker color Post-it. When I looked this up online, I saw a version with only 1 fox. So if you are feeling a little overwhelmed by how much is on here, obviously feel free to start with a smaller number of pennies and dimes or Post-its or however you're doing it, and then kind of get the hang of what's happening. So it's a combination of lots of different games where, you slide, you move one, you can jump over things. You're supposed to, the geese are trying to get into the barn. They're trying to protect the barn, and they're trying to get rid of the foxes. The foxes are trying to eat the geese. So, just sort of your normal, like the life cycle that you've all studied. There you go, a little nod to the life cycle. So the first player is one of the geese will get to move, and they can only move 1 space at a time. You can only move forward if you are playing a goose position until you reach the barn. Once you get all the way to the back of the barn, then it's kind of like in checkers where once you reach the end, you can do some things. So they kind of get a king goose and they can do things. So what we would do is have our first person, and you don't have to put these here. You can put them anywhere in these red dots that you want for the foxes. Okay, so let's see what would happen if the first goose, let's say he moves here. Okay, so now my lighting is a little off. So the first goose has moved there, and now it's the fox's turn, and you have to move. You don't get to skip your turn and say, I'm not moving, I'm just staying where I am. So the fox, let's say the fox moves out up here. All right. Well, geese cannot jump foxes, so they're kind of in a little spot here. What are they going to do? You're going to want to make sure that you do whatever you can so that the fox can't jump a goose, right? So let's see, you could fill in maybe here, or let's bring this other one down. There, I brought that one down. Okay, they have to jump on the lines and move on the lines. So you can move diagonally, forward, up and down, side to side, but you can't jump across if there isn't a line. All right, so you just keep moving back and forth like that. The next fox, the fox must move again. The goose must move again. The fox must move again. So the interesting thing is now this fox is in the center here. Now, if you play according to online versions and move this goose in, the fox is completely surrounded and the goose would win. The geese would win. Oh, no, it's not completely surrounded. There's one more spot. So he can move up here. And then you can completely surround the fox, and the fox would then lose. So it feels a little to the advantage of the geese with this many geese. So if you lessen the number of geese and drop it down to one fox, it might become a little more competitive. So we can try, if Kirsty doesn't mind annotating on her screen, 2 people can play. Somebody can be the fox, somebody can be the goose, and you'll have to use all those wonderful directions that you've learned how to use in the math map in order to describe what direction you are trying to go. So let's see, is there 2 people who would like to volunteer to be our first round? And we can do this either with the 24 and the 2, or we can drop it back to something a little more like 12 and 1.
I'm going to suggest 12 and 1 just because of the camera and the time, if it plays
Okay.
well enough, Jill. Let me ask you a question.
That
Were
would
the
be great.
geese able to move backwards?
Only after they reach the barn. Once they reach in the red dots, then they are now allowed to move. Oh, I probably had one move backward, didn't I? Which would not be legal, which would then mean that my game was not right.
Okay. Well, he might have been the one that had gotten on the red dot, then backed up to track.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying
That's
to figure
true.
out.
He could have.
Mhm.
And I even covered that point. And then when you're playing it, you have to have your friends hold you accountable. So let's see. Any 2 people that were willing to play our first round here?
Play. You want to play against me? Let's see. Kristen, you want to play against me?
Sure, I'll play against you.
Okay, play against me. All right, so start us off, Jill.
Okay, so let's see. Can I annotate here? Or can you all? Is it set that everybody on the call can annotate?
I was going to say, I think people might be able to annotate. If you click the annotate button, you may be able to annotate yourself.
Where is that?
It looks
well,
like
on
there's a
my
little
computer, it's at the top.
pencil. Oh, mine looks like it's on the bottom.
Notes, maybe. Mine says notes off to the side.
Right above the microphone, or right around the microphone, there was a little word says annotate, and I clicked on that.
I think, Shauna, you're going to have to be me. I have no buttons.
Okay, where are we starting, Lee?
Do it.
So you're going to put
that
your
me?
12.
Do you see me?
Yes.
I see Kristen.
There's your fox right there. Good. And so we need 12 geese, and you can put them anywhere on the black dot, any black dot, need 12.
So should I circle that one?
If you're going to put your fox there, then yes.
You
Since
have
it was
a
red,
preference, Lee?
you're a fox.
But doesn't it have to be on a black dot?
The
On a red-
foxes are on a red dot, and the geese
Oh, okay.
start off on a black dot.
Gotcha.
And it is easier when you can actually manipulate with some game pieces or coins or whatever you like to maneuver. They say, and coins are so handy, you know.
Shauna,
Yeah,
you're doing
Fox-
great.
You could also
And
with
the-
coins. You could even do a heads and tails so that once they reach the barn, you flip it over, and now you know that that one is allowed to move forward or backward.
So if it's on it's gonna have, what about the fox? The fox, once the
You
fox
can move
hits a
in any
black, then
direction. You can move
Oh.
any direction at all times. The fox is very flexible.
So I guess I'm the fox. Am I the fox?
Yes, so the geese goes first.
Oh. Where are we going, Lee?
You have to move forward. So in a forward, it can be diagonal or side to side. You just can't move backward until you've reached the barn, and then you can go in any direction.
Why don't you
Okay,
take
so
your right
choose
moves
a goose
yellow and
and
move into red?
So do we want to get to a red, Lee? Which one?
Yeah, move one of the yellows to a red.
Do I draw a line like that, Jill, or just
I would just
so I know where I
move
came
it
from?
and erase the old one, like create a new maybe, and then
Oh,
erase the one
okay,
that you
because
got
it
rid of.
doesn't exist there.
Right.
Yeah, you think we're learning the math games. We're really learning how to use Zoom. Right? There's
Learning
always
how to
something to learn.
annotate.
There you go.
All right,
All right,
so
now the fox.
the fox can get the goose, right? I can eat the goose.
You sure can. You jump right over him, and then you got
There you go.
Okay,
And now
That's
so
you're
then I
so not
erase.
fair.
and now you're on that other side of the goose. You're you don't stay in the goose's spot. You go all the way over like checkers.
You have to, but if I
Oh, I
had a
have to-
goose there, she wouldn't have been able to do that. So that was really a bad move.
So I don't stay where
You
where I
jump it.
captured.
You
Oh, I
jump
jump
like
it.
in
Jump
checkers.
it,
Go
like
all
in
the way over,
checkers.
and now the goose
We can do a
is
check mark
gone.
instead of
Yes, we
drawing
can.
it. Let's do a check mark.
Oh,
That's
that is easier. Yes. And then erase where you ate the goose. There you go. And then Shauna, you'll have to erase that yellow dot too.
Because we were captured.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's
Because she ate you.
the turn of the geese.
Okay. So now I need strategy here, Lee. You got
Yeah,
to tell
yeah,
me where.
I didn't give you any, did I? We gotta catch that fox. He's the green check. Is that what he is?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't jump him unless
No,
he's
not yet.
ahead of me, right?
Yeah. So we need
The
to
other
lure him
thing-
back to the center.
The other
So
thing
if
you
you-
can do to win as the geese is if you fill in the entire barn. If you cover all 9 dots with geese, or if you surround the fox, you win.
So
Would
if
I
you
be-
move the center, if you move one of the center yellow ones down to the top left barn one, he will be forced either to jump us, but then we can jump him. Can we? Oh, maybe not. No, I'm
No,
wrong.
you can't
Just
jump
tell me
him.
Well,
I'm
if
You
wrong.
I
can
move
surround him.
here, he could jump me, right? He can go this way, right? But if I move here, I'm on a red, which means I would now be able to go anywhere, forwards and backwards,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, but he'll still jump you to the right.
I think,
Well,
don't they
he
have,
can't-
do they have to get all the way to the back of the barn, Jill, before they can?
No,
Be-
it says, according to the directions, once you reach the barn, so I'm guessing any red dot in the barn means you can move. The other thing is you're safe in the barn. If you get in the barn, he can't jump you in the barn. So,
So if you move to that red, we're safe.
yes. So you might
If
have
I
to
move-
sacrifice a couple geese to get 9 in the barn, or you could go offensive and surround the fox.
But I can't
But isn't
jump.
it-
If he was here, I couldn't jump him over
Cannot
here
jump him.
because there's nothing
If-
here, right? It has to
He's in
be
a
on
spot,
these lines.
you can't. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think about this spot so that we have at least one geese that has mobility?
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then erase
This
the
one.
that one. Okay, so then the fox I can't get any more geese, right? Because I have to jump up
Right,
here.
you'll have to move to a new spot to get geese, yes.
But I can't get a goose.
No, not in this turn. You'll have to just move somewhere, and then maybe you'll get to jump next time, depending on what they do.
I go there again. Can I go back where I was?
You sure? Yeah, the fox can go in any direction at all times.
Can I jump him now? Can I go from here to here?
So the geese can never jump, but you can move one space.
I keep forgetting that.
I don't understand why I couldn't jump. So I'm never getting the fox. I'm always running
No.
from the fox.
Well, or surround the fox. You can surround him, but you can't jump him. So it's
And
going to
with
take
12
teamwork.
geese, with 12 geese, we probably have a little chance of surrounding them.
Wow, but wouldn't I
Yeah.
be surrounded if the black dot just north of the barn and the black dot, what is that, west of the barn where the fox is, were geese? Then wouldn't I be surrounded? And oh, but I can move down. I can move all
Right.
over the barn.
You would be. You would be. But
You'd
for
be
us to move
surrounded, but
down
you
there,
could, jump. So you kind of have to be surrounded. You're going to have to be surrounded by sort of two layers, because
Yeah.
just moving one to those positions, you could jump over them.
yeah. So Shauna, maybe move that yellow one you just moved to the far left corner. Or
Over
yeah, is
here?
that what? Did you delete the previous one?
She
I
did.
started here and I moved here. So now we're saying I'm gonna take him and move him here. But what if I moved this guy here, doesn't that surround him? If I left this one here and I just moved this one down, then isn't
It would
he
have to
surrounded?
be, he's only surrounded
No.
when he cannot move. If there's any spot he can move to, he's not surrounded.
Okay,
So if there's an opening that he can still get out, then he's not done.
okay. And so we wanted to move from here to here. Is that what you wanted, Lee?
I can't see what you're pointing at. You're just gonna
Yeah,
have to
they're
make the
really hard
decision.
to see with the,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't see it.
You said move to the corner?
No,
Okay.
do something. Just do what you think's right. Don't listen to me. I can't see.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
All right. Well,
So if you've done that, so for sake of the game, if I moved here, right, which would be a
yes,
poor choice, but just
Mhm.
for instance, then I'm almost surrounded. Is that correct?
right. But they would take at least 2 turns to surround you,
But-
maybe more,
right,
in which case you could be
right.
jumping some geese in the meantime.
Okay. So I could jump up. I could jump to the top of the cross,
Yes.
right? I could jump
Yes.
that and get up into the top of the cross.
You can go the fox can go anywhere, but you don't capture when you're in the barn. So if you jump over geese in the barn, you don't get to keep them. You don't get to eat them. But so there's a few things to keep in mind. The geese can win by filling up the barn or making it where the fox is completely surrounded and has no move left. The fox wins by eating all the geese. Or blocking the goose in, even at the last one, if the goose can't go anywhere, if the fox was, let's say there were 2 spots and the goose didn't have a move, then I don't know if that can happen the way the board is set up. So probably you're done. Either way, the fox would jump the goose.
Okay, so then since he's here, I cannot jump him. Like I cannot go this way,
No,
but so in order to save myself, I'm gonna move up here and he still can't get any of us. He's still stuck.
right. So
But if I
I'm-
don't move this guy up here, he's gonna get one of my geese.
So right here, see that? Did that show up? That box?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. So the goose could only move backward like that if they've reached the barn. But it would be a nice spot for the goose. The fox could land there and eat a goose. Does that make sense? So
Yes, but it's
you might want to start your geese out more along an edge or further back so they have some room to move forward and they aren't wasting all those spaces that they can't use in moving backward. Because you're giving the fox a whole place to jump
Yeah.
over you if you have
So
a
she's
big
giving you
foot.
advice after the fact. Like there's nothing you can do
Yes,
about
well,
that right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's too late.
exactly.
It's too late.
No, there isn't.
Let's just do
Because
it.
sometimes
Let's do
until
a
you
couple.
watch people play it, you don't know you have advice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. Thanks for paying attention,
Okay.
Jill. So do a couple
Okay.
more moves and let's play another game.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
There are lots of places on YouTube that different people have played this, and so you can find some versions and varieties. And if you watch someone else do it, it might also be like, okay, yes.
So that goose moved backward, so that's wrong. Because forward means toward the
Correct.
barn.
Yes,
So
toward the barn is forward.
Oh, I totally missed that. Okay. Wow.
I did that too
Okay.
when I was doing my post-it note
Okay,
one.
that's too much for me to think about. So I can't move up, but then because I went up there, I was here and I went up there, so that was wrong.
Yeah, I think maybe more practice or another time or two people
Okay.
playing this that we make a video of. But really, like I said, there are some on YouTube that you can watch, but at least we fought through it a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I know the rules now, and I also think it's funny to watch you guys. So it's a comedy show.
And also, don't you think it also depends on who you play with? Because sometimes I play with people who give more grace on the rules, and then I play with other people who are sticklers for the rule. My husband especially. And
It
so it
is
really
true.
depends on who you're playing with.
And watching it, you can catch the mistakes kind of easier than playing it. It's like if I watch my husband do the Wordle, I know what it is super fast. I'm like, oh yeah, you should do this. But when I'm doing it for myself, no. So watching us play this game is probably easier to catch, oh, well, they could, than being the one playing.
Good.
That was
So
fun.
Shauna, you want to take one last move, Shauna? See if you figure anything out.
Well, I think since I have to go forward, I'm gonna move this guy down here.
Okay, do it.
And that still protects me, I think.
With younger
still-
children, you might want to create arrows or post-it note or the little page protectors that look like
Mhm.
arrows that show them the direction to move. You might
Yes.
want to limit even smaller the number of coins you use. You might want to talk about what is surrounding. You might want to talk about what is safe. So you might want to play with a lot smaller number of pieces. And then with the older kids, ask them how they can even complicate it beyond this.
Well, someone needs to come up with chess, like there's chess designations for each spot. Someone needs to come up with those if we're going to do this online. Oh, I love Yading saying use chocolate chips and then eat them the whole time.
Yes. Everyone will want to be a fox.
Yes. That's good. So, Kristen, thank you for volunteering.
You're welcome. Voluntolding.
I know.
Right. I would say that would be the same with me. Thanks, Lee, for voluntolding me.
You're welcome. All right, what's next, gang?
So I was just going to say, I think I just wanted to comment on the fact that this is our first game that we've seen that isn't explicitly mathematical. And so a lot of our other games, we've really been emphasizing calculation practice in the way of a game, where this we aren't. And so some families may have a question about, well, why did you choose this game? What does this, right? How does this help us with our mathematical thinking? And so I just thought I would just open it up for just a couple of minutes and see, what do you think? I mean, I know I have my ideas, but why is this a game that would help us think mathematically?
It's strategic thinking. I mean, you have to really figure out what if what are the consequences of my actions? What are the consequences of my choices? And those are two themes of challenge, so.
Good.
Also, this is booklet 7, which is exponentiation. And I believe this is when we do our number line of logarithmic and linear number lines. And so there's a little bit of, what happens when we move this. Maybe it ties into that just a little bit.
Yeah. It's more two-dimensional grid practice, but that's okay. You're looking forward to the following 2 weeks.
There's a lot of things we could talk about order, right? So there's an order of things I can do and I can't do. So that gives us that same idea mathematically, right? There's things we can do and things we can't do, or we have to go in a certain order. Just thinking about when you said that about Jill, about, when we think about exponents, and then especially if we looked in lesson 22, where we talk about permutations and combinations, there's another place where we could say, well, how many different choices do I have? And I could move I'm going to annotate here just real quick to show you what I'm thinking. If I had a goose here and I moved that goose to here, right? I had 3 choices. Well, now how many choices do I have? Well, I have another 3. So how many choices total did I have from my first starting position after 2 positions? I would have had
There's
9
8 there.
different.
I
We
really
can't count the
like
middle
that.
one. That's where you are. There's 8.
There's 8 because
That's
because each of these is only going to have 2 choices.
Mhm.
that's some good
So
thinking, even if they never played. Just that, I like that.
One of the things I find frustrating, but it's good to talk about, is the you don't have all the diagonals. You only have half the diagonals that you would want.
all right. Well, let's go ahead and take a look here, and I'm just going to take a minute to, for some reason, I'm trying to find I just realized.
I
Okay.
trashed my things on the annotation, and so it got rid of all of my markings. So maybe if we each just put our markings in the trash.
I think I got them.
Thank you.
So as we look here, this is not necessarily a game or an activity, but rather an overview of all of the different manipulatives and tools that we might use. So I thought we would talk through each one and invite you to think through, when do you remember from this past year using that manipulative, or when from this past year do you think you might have wanted to be able to use that manipulative? So let's talk about a ruler, and what are the 2 ways that we may use a ruler in the math map?
I've seen recently, and I can't remember which lesson it was, where we had to measure sides of triangles. And I made the mistake of not measuring the printed book. I was measuring my screen. And so I doubled the centimeters, and I don't know why I was thinking, oh, your screen is the same size as your paper, because it's not. But anyway, because I have a big screen because I can't see. But that's one way that I've seen it recently, is just measuring the sides of the triangles and writing them in the booklet.
Yeah, so measuring, and then it's also used as a straight edge in, like the constructions week.
Excellent. So that really is the 2 primary reasons we would use our ruler. So we talked about measuring, we've talked about using it for constructions. What else is in that constructions week that isn't necessarily a construction, but where we might just want to use it as a straight edge, or we may want to be able to measure something? Does anybody remember the page 4 set from lesson 14, and what were the activities that we had students working through?
You're talking about using the patty paper to measure something with, or
No, still using the ruler, where we might
oh,
use it as a ruler and as a straight edge.
with the double-edged straight
Like a double
edges.
straight edge. Yeah.
So there are those constructions, but the fourth page, right? Page 4, page 8, page 12, and page 16 are probably the most fun of lesson
Oh.
14.
Do you mean using the compass?
Nope.
You got to ask him more
So-
clearly, Kirsty. You mean that, how did we use are you asking how did we use the ruler on page 4?
Yeah, so Babs is showing you a picture. Does anybody remember that from lesson 14? What was the fun part of lesson 14? Was doing all the geometric art.
The artwork. Yeah.
Yeah, so the
So just
artwork. So we
using-
did line drawing. So there may be times where I might need to measure and draw a straight line. So in lesson
Okay.
14, I may see that I'm doing both measuring and straight lines. Now, interestingly, because again, remember that Lee has, from the very beginning, she has wanted parents to feel as though they have everything that they need in their booklets. So if you look at the back of our booklet here, what note is next to our ruler and next to our protractor?
To scale.
Drawn to
So you could
scale.
cut them out and use them.
Yes.
That's great.
Now, would you want to trust your cut out ruler as your straight edge?
No.
Probably not me. What could you, looking at the back of your book, what could you use as your straight edge?
The actual spine of
The
the book.
booklet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the booklet itself, the spine would be nice and strong, probably stronger than the page edge. But yeah, using my booklet itself probably would be a better choice as a straight edge versus the cutout ruler. But that cutout ruler and that cutout protractor are going to allow us to measure things, even if we don't have a plastic or metal, some more firm example of that tool. So I just really appreciate Lee's attention to detail that a parent who says, I forgot to go and get that, can actually cut these out and have those tools at their disposal. So the next thing let's talk about is our place value set. And I went ahead and I put a little clip from one of the digits pages here so that you could see how Lee has illustrated some of our exercises in the lesson pages and ask you, how do those compare to our place value set? So here I'm only showing you the digit, the one little unit cubes, right? The digits. In other exercises, Lee uses the whole 10 rods, the 100 squares, and even shows those 1,000 cubes. So where could we use those? So first, we can see that I could take exercises that Lee has put into the booklets and model those with things that I can actually touch. So I can actually have my students take 2 blocks and 3 blocks and count them to see that there's 5 blocks altogether. So especially for my little learners who are still developing their fine motor skills, it's a place to practice those fine motor skills, as well as giving my kinesthetic learners the opportunity to touch things and use those, whether it's addition or subtraction or multiplication or division. I can actually use my place value set to physically do my operations. The name of our place value set suggests that it might also be helpful for doing something else. What else could we use our place value set for?
Learn place value.
Yes. So what I just said, we have unit cubes, 10 rods, 100 squares, and 1,000 cubes. So what base would we be talking about if we were using our place value set to explore place value?
Base 10.
Base 10.
Base 10. So how could I build a number with my place value set?
Or maybe let's ask it this way. So Babs, how would you build 1,238?
So is the blue one the 1,000? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I would have a blue one. You said 1,200?
Yeah.
So 2 red ones. No, wait. That's no. 1 blue one, 2 yellow ones, and 3 red ones will be 30, and then 8 units.
Yeah.
Do they make these place value sets? Like, can you buy them? Is this I remember the teddy bear counters. That's what I used for, but
You can buy these.
they weren't really place values.
Yeah, they
My
run
math
anywhere
set
from
had them.
they
Yeah,
run
the
anywhere
one
from
I
like a
used.
$9 cheap set to a $29 really sturdy set.
The set that came with mine before I found CC, the sets were hollow on the inside, so whenever you subtracted, if you turned them upside down, they looked different, and you could use those to show a subtraction.
Yeah.
And there's probably for moms who don't want to go and buy something else, you can probably find some paper versions and either make little paper cubes, paper rods, paper squares, and then fold your square into a cube for your 1,000 cube. So there's a lot of different ways that we could use that place value set. Can you see where this would be helpful with youngest students? How could it maybe help our older students?
We can do a bunch together and teach them how to borrow and carry. More for those middle grades.
I think it would help with their speed math too. You know, we sometimes have to really stop and think, but if we lay it out and practice building it and adding things quickly, maybe it'll create some more connections to make that simpler.
One of the things that are important, and that's why we have pennies and the other ones are buttons, is 5 is not an actual number to see. The human mind can see up to 4 without knowing that that's what it's seeing, but 5 takes practice. So just throwing small handfuls of these unit cubes on the table and asking your children to go, like look at them, say 5, 9, 5, 6, 7, counting off of 5s. It's good practice.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I was also thinking a multiplication problem. Let's say if you had like 23 times 43, it's hard to have enough to do the answer. But if you're visualizing that the 2 is not 2 units, it's 2 rods that you're multiplying. And then in the next number, same thing, your tens place. It's hard. It was hard for me. I mean, I think I was an adult. I could really get this down that those numbers don't, that 2 stands for 20. It doesn't stand for 2. And it might be helpful even for older kids who know how to go through the motion of multiplying, but they don't really understand why it's working the way it is. Why do you put that 0 there in that spot to hold it? Like, what is that all about? When you're adding your answer together.
It's good.
So for our
You also
older
can-
student, go ahead, Lee.
You go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say for our older students too, remember that we are going to be looking at a lot of algebra with our upper challenge students, but we still want them to be thinking deeply about numbers. So why not challenge them to create a place value set that's in base 3, or a place value set that's in base 4, or in base 5? So there's a way to, again, use that kinesthetic learning and take this idea of manipulative, but have them create it for a different base.
That's a really good idea.
If you
I
were
don't know.
doing
I would
that,
know where to begin to do that.
would you make that out of paper and just have like your 3 hooked together instead of a 10 hooked together, and that would be the top end of your base?
Yes, so I'd still have my 1s, and then my next one would be 3. And then what would my square be?
9,
9,
9. And then what would my cube be?
27.
27.
27. So now
That's
we can
cool.
actually start to see, right? If we were to do that, that might help our students if we wanted to play with different bases. Say, try this. What does this look like if we did that? All right. So we've talked a lot about flashcards, and I love the fact that Babs has pulled in flashcards as a way to help us with some of our other games in terms of picking up specific grammar. So we can take a look at our entire flashcard deck, but we can also take a look at pulling out and choosing the grammar that we want to practice and integrating those ideas. With our notations flashcards, imagine this. What if you used some of your notations flashcards and wrote mathematical sentences for your student to have to read? So you might have to write some words in, but you could put a flashcard down and a couple of words and another flashcard and actually have them read some mathematical sentences. So there's a lot of ways that we can use those flashcards. And I think that we've probably talked a lot about that already. But does anybody have anything unique that they've done with flashcards that they'd like to share?
I've started using mine in a like a memory box. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that idea, but where I have like index separators in there, and I have daily and then odd and even and then days of the week and then days of the month. And so we've been trying to the cards that are like, what is an algebraic number? Well, it's a polynomial with that's something that has a long definition I need to go over. We keep that in the daily part until my son really has it down, and then we move it back to even or odd. So then we're doing it every other day, and then we move it back to, you know, the days of the week. So we continue to review it, but not as frequently. And that's finally helping us to kind of get a handle on like actually mastering cards.
Jana, I had not heard that concept before, but I love that idea of a memory box.
It's so good. We use it for scripture. We've been doing some Latin vocab. It's working really well. It's a great memory tool. Yeah.
Jana, I used to do seminars when I was an AR teaching people how to set up the memory boxes, and I've got one for foundations. All my foundations work is in one memory box. And it used to sit underneath my couch. Like if I was in cycle 1, cycle 2 and 3 were under my couch. And I was like, okay, what's the purpose of that? So now all the memory work is there. All of our IEW vocabulary words are in there. And then I have another one for challenge, but I hadn't thought about using these flashcards in that way. So I'm going to start doing that. I love it.
My one problem is like, because they're two-sided, I'm trying to figure out the best way to, like, I don't want to have one tucked back in the back that we haven't done both sides. So do you do both sides at the same time, or do you mark them somehow so that you know this one's gone through your box and now you're focusing on the other side? I'm still trying to figure that out. So Kristen, you
I,
can give me your ideas.
I think because one side has the Classical Conversations logo and the other one
Right,
doesn't, that you just know that, okay, this week we're just doing the CC side, and then this week we're doing the flip side or something, you know,
right.
so that you're, because that's the only way that I can differentiate the two-sidedness of the notation cards. I've been trying to organize mine and figure out the best way, um, you know, plus adding the new ones that just came out. And so I'm still playing around with that. Week
And
30
I
is
will say
tomorrow
with
for me, so I'm a little distracted. I've got senior thesis tomorrow, so
Oh man. The new ones that have come out, so I've taken just like a sample of, so if I have a whole exponent that's positive, I have one of those in there. And then I have a broken exponent that's positive, and then I have one of each of those as negatives, so that he's not going through a ton of different flashcards, but he's learning, what do I do? What is the answer to this problem when I have this type of exponent? And I think there's understanding coming just from those four cards. So anyway,
I think you could also use the flashcards by almost Jeopardy or headbands, you know, where you have, or 20 questions, where you are giving clues and letting the person name the thing, or you could describe a sentence and ask them to use those notations to write the sentence that you read and see if it looks like what you would expect it to look like, or how many of the notations that they included in their sentence.
There's some great ideas. So how about because we're I don't want to go too long on one, so I guess we need to pick up our pace, but patty paper, right? We know that we use the patty paper for the constructions. Patty paper is also great for tracing. It is great for measuring angles. What are some angles I could measure with patty paper?
Can fold it in half and do 45 degrees.
Could fold it 3 ways, and then I could have a 30 and a 60.
Oh yeah, you could. And then just using an open one to measure 90-degree angles.
I could continue to fold those in half, right? If I get a 30 and I fold it in half, I get 15 and 7.5. If I had a 45 and I folded it in half, I get 22.5. So there's there's a place where you can practice division, where you can practice that patterning of repeated division by 2, all by folding your patty paper.
Wow.
The patty paper for the young kids to start just folding in all those ways you said, because it's less expensive than origami paper. And so it gives them practice before I give them the more expensive paper.
I was gonna say that it looks like origami paper. I remember when I was young, we have paper craft that we folded in quarters or in eighths, and then we cut shapes around them. And it's almost like how you make snowflakes. And if you open it up, and then you can see one cut is actually 3 cards, and one is actually 4 cuts. So that's always fun for little kids.
Yes.
Those are all great patterns to help them see, right? The things that looks like it's hidden, but what's happening. Those are some great activities. So our geoboard, how many of you, I know it's hard for everybody to raise their hands, but thinking about a geoboard, what are some things that you might use to explore on a geoboard? What seems to be maybe some of the more obvious things to explore on a geoboard?
Counting the pegs and the patterns.
So even without any rubber bands, I can start using that geoboard and looking at some of the patterns that are on there or counting. Just the name geo probably makes a lot of us think of geometry. So the shapes that we're looking at in geometry, so segments, triangles, squares, rectangles, being able to create those on a geoboard. You might talk about dilations by making something bigger or smaller. You could talk about things that are similar or congruent, challenging your students to create a shape that is similar or a shape that's congruent. We could talk about lengths and areas. So there's a lot of different things that we could use that geoboard for. Some geoboards may even have the opportunity to explore the unit circle on them. So you can look, it'll be round and look like a circle. So I can explore some ideas about circles or the unit circle by looking at that center peg and exploring some of those angles. So there's a lot of different ways that that geoboard can help our kinesthetic learners, all of our learners, explore some of those geometric ideas. Graph paper.
I have a question, Kirsty, about the geoboard.
Yeah.
You know the exercise you were just talking about in 14 where they were using the ruler and drawing. Could you do that on a geoboard? Or is that too much of a stretch?
No, I think you could do some of those on a geoboard. Absolutely.
I just think some people who have a harder time, I don't know. I think I had some students in the past that had trouble with that section, just like if they had fine motor skills issues with the keeping it straight. But I think they might be okay with putting the rubber bands around and making it, I don't know, it feels like it might be a little bit easier. I don't know.
Oh, I like that idea. That's a great idea. The graph paper we've talked about quite a bit because we do include graph paper in the blue books where we see graphs at the top of every page. The graph paper we know is going to help us to organize our work, to keep it neat. It may be helpful for students to line up their place value for operations. It may be helpful for students who are exploring graphing to do that on a bigger piece of paper and not just the small graphs that are in the booklet. The graph paper is going to be helpful. Tangrams, we actually, does anybody remember what week it was? I don't. But one of the weeks actually has different tangrams shapes for students to build, and there's a set of tangrams that you can cut out. So again, Lee providing all of these different activities. There is a week where you can actually cut those tangrams out. But if you wanted to have a plastic set, they're usually fairly inexpensive. A lot of the times you can get them in the school sales. They'll sell them in the Target One Spot or other places because they become a puzzle where you can create all kinds of different things. So they're great for quiet play, great in the car, especially if you get a magnetic set. And they help us to explore some of the relationships between those different shapes.
Tangrams helped me a lot on the week 18 with transformations because rotation was really hard for me. And so to take that triangle and maybe a popsicle stick or a skewer or a straw and rotate helped me see what I was actually rotating because I had just been spinning my shape in one spot and it was obviously not getting me the right answer.
Bill, that's a great way to use the tangrams. And we could, just looking at them, we could talk about the different shapes that are there. Which shapes are similar, which shapes are congruent, what does it mean if something is a parallelogram? Is the square also the parallelogram? So we can just examine those shapes that are there and consider their characteristics. The compass is probably the most challenging tool that we encounter, right? Holding it with enough pressure that your one point doesn't move, enough pressure that your other point does move but is writing, and nothing is skipping around, and you're turning it, right? There's a lot there. And I think even as adults, all of us can agree that it is challenging to use a compass well. So having a compass that is a good quality compass is really important to minimize the frustrations that your students are going to encounter. There are other compass options out there. We have looked at a safety compass where it may be easier sometimes for little fingers because you can put your finger on part of it and spin the other part. But one of the things I really like to do with my students is to help them see that a compass doesn't have to be a small tool. When we're doing it on paper, oftentimes it is. But the simplest compass is a pen or a pencil, piece of string, and a pin or something to hold one end fixed. So if you take your students outside and have one student be the center and then another student be your drawing side and a piece of rope between them, and then, right, you can draw great big circles outside, and helping them to connect all of these different ideas together to understand that they're all a compass because they are all saying that I have the center and a radius, and that every point on that radius, right, that radius traces, every point is the same distance from that center. So that's what's important to help our students see when we think about the compass as a tool. Over time, they're going to develop that flexibility, but helping them to understand why a compass works is more of a lifetime skill. So then the next thing that we see here is our dice set. We've talked a lot about dice these few weeks. and how we can use those dice to play different games.
Oh, these are fun.
No, those are look really big and I don't like smiley face.
And we've also used cards. So we don't have cards listed here, but a pack of playing cards is another way that we can get random numbers. So those are the dice, and the cards are great ways to generate this bunch of random numbers that can give us extra practice, as well as being useful in games. Then, as Lee mentioned, our counters. So we have coins listed here as counters, but we could also use buttons. Yachting, I think that the absolute favorite counter now is going to be the idea of a chocolate chip, right? M&Ms, gummy bears. So there's lots of different counters that we can use there to help our students count, right? As Lee was talking about, right? Putting different groups together and being able to count, or as game pieces. The scientific calculator, we've had a lot of questions about the scientific calculator, and any calculator these days is really going to be a scientific calculator. Very few people these days, I think, are able to even find a 4-function calculator like we used to have. I just don't think they make them anymore like they used to. It is not a graphing calculator. So we want to be clear that a scientific calculator means that it can calculate trigonometry ratios, right? Those trigonometry ratios. That's what makes it a scientific calculator. You're going to see the log button and the trig buttons. And if it can do the trig ratios, it can also do the inverse trig ratios. Any calculator that you get on your phone is going to be a scientific calculator. And we use Desmos a lot in the office to check our graphs. They also have a really nice online calculator. And it turns out that they actually have apps also. So the Desmos app is a great calculator that you can use on your phone. It's nice for moms because if you are calculating in fractions, you can actually have it take your decimal answer and convert it to fractions. So you may want to have your students making those conversions while you as a mom can just get it with the touch of a button. So that's one nice thing about the Desmos calculator. Those scientific calculators are not expensive. So I have one here in my desk that I don't think costs more than $10, right? So it's just your basic calculator. A lot of the times now they're solar, so you don't even have to worry about batteries. And while we want our students to be able to calculate, we want them to have the capacity to calculate without a calculator. We also recognize, especially when we're talking about trig and logarithms, that calculators are going to be something that they are going to use in their lifetime. And so being able to use a calculator when appropriate is a good skill. So no, we're not encouraging students to use the calculator for all of the exercises in the math map, but we are encouraging families to learn how to use a calculator for those times when it is appropriate. And then that brings us back to our protractor. Again, it is designed for you to be able to cut that out, because what does a protractor measure?
Angles?
It does. It measures angles. It measures that rotation from our flat around to wherever we end up on our scale. And looking at this protractor, is it measuring in degrees or is it measuring in radians?
Degrees.
It is measuring in degrees. It's important, just like with our ruler, to know what units we want to measure. Am I measuring in inches? Am I measuring in half inches? Am I measuring in centimeters or millimeters or meters? Am I measuring in degrees or am I measuring in radians? So it's a great conversation to have with your students to discuss what units are we using. And that's another thing to remember when we're using our scientific calculator, that our calculators can work in both degrees and radians. And so if a student doesn't know how to use their calculator and doesn't understand degrees and radians, there's always a great chance that they're going to get the wrong answer because they may be using the wrong units. So always having that conversation with our student about what units are we using, I think is important. And these tools are going to help us to remember to have that conversation.
Can I ask about the protractor? Because
Yes.
most protractors, actually all the protractor that I've seen is transparent or translucent so that you could actually put the point in the middle. If I were to cut this out and use this one, I won't be able to see through the orange point. And so I'm just thinking how this is.
I I would say if I was to use this and I had an angle and I put the protractor on top, if let's say my angle wasn't big enough and so my protractor sits on top of it, something like this. Right? So I've lined up here. What I would do is I would actually take, I'm going to use a different color here. I would take my straight edge and I would lay my straight edge over the top along my angle, and then that'll actually go on top of my protractor and help me line that up.
Something that's interesting is that translucent plastic's only been around since 1950. Somehow students and engineers managed to figure it out with these solid colors. So I think what I remember doing, because I'm old enough, plastic was just coming around, is doing every single time what Kersey just did, is you had to draw it and extend it. So this having the translucent is just be appreciative, I guess.
But what about the middle point, that the angle point? Don't you have to measure up to the middle?
Oh, I
For the-
see what you're saying, because that line is in the middle. So I think I would probably just cut my protractor along that line, I think. So here, I think I would maybe fold or cut
Along there.
my protractor along this line. I now see what you're saying. Right. So that line that matches up with the 180.
But at least
Yellow maybe
in my
didn't show.
mind.
Another, it would, it
How
adds
do
a
they do
step.
that? How do they do that when you can't see it? Like the middle point. Like, yeah, interesting.
It adds a step, but if you used a piece of patty paper to trace the angle, you could lay that on top of the protractor. And then, but it adds an extra step unless you want that practice.
But it's
I mean, I would look at this protractor as like an emergency protractor. It's not the one you want to use all the time. It's the one that you have where it's like, come on, get the, we're grandmas for the week, granddad's sick. You have a protractor, do your best.
Here's the other thing you could do too, is just cut a little V in the protractor, and that way you could see that vertex point.
Yeah.
or use my compass to poke a dot through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or use a nail, be a hammering project.
My mind is blown.
Yeah. Oh. I think Kersey's idea is the best. Just cut it differently.
If
It'll
you
be easier.
pushed a thumbtack up through the bottom of the angle and then to the protractor down on top of it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
All right. Well, just a reminder of all the different ways we support families and tutors that are working through the math map. Don't forget that there's a great archive now of past book clubs, as well as meeting every Wednesday. We have 2 more weeks where we're going to be going through lessons 9 and 10, and then lessons 11 and 12. And then on May 21st, it's going to be a great opportunity to come and just get a tour of the companion. So if that's something you haven't had time to explore, this will be a great time to come and see maybe some of the hidden resources that are there. And then we will be back to games and activities after that. And that brings us to our question and answer time. So are there any questions that anybody has that haven't been asked or answered yet?
I have another question about reading something. For the summation, how you read it when you have n underneath and the number on top.
Good question.
So you would usually see it in this type of a context. And what it says is that you are going to sum 5n plus 1 from n equals 1 to 4. And sometimes people will say from n equals 1 to n equals 4. And so what that means is I have 5 times 1. This is where n equals 1 plus 1. Plus, then I have my 5 times 2 plus 1. Then 5 times 3 plus 1 plus, ran out of room, 5 times 4 plus 1. And then I would simplify that to get my sum.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, believe it or not, we are still in the Math Map office having discussions about how some things should be read and said, because there's a lot of linguistic shorthand that people have used over the years, and we use it, but it doesn't necessarily always truly reflect what we're doing.
Right.
The powers being one of those. That's my own personal hang up now that we say 2 to the 5th power is
I know.
not at all right, and it doesn't mean anything, but we've all said it for so many years, and nobody's ever said, stop, how do you really do that? And so I appreciate Lee's emphasis on the language of mathematics and her emphasis on saying things correctly so that we can be accurate and we can communicate clearly. There's a little meme I saw or a little video that somebody put out about how to pronounce polygonal, pentagonal, octagonal, and so forth. And he said, it's not polygonal. And then he came back and he said, but if we're trying to communicate and I say polygonal, you all know what I mean. Right? So there are cases where sometimes we pronounce things in a weird way and we're still communicating. But there are other times where our language is sloppy. And if you don't know the same sloppiness, the same idiom, for example, then you're lost, right? And we know we do that linguistically, right? Like trying to think of, well, what's a Southernism that we might use down here, and you go someplace else and nobody has any clue what you're talking about.
Harry, when they mean they drove the car.
There we go. So those kinds of words, we're trying to be very specific in the math map. And so there are things that we encounter and we go, well, we've always said it that way, but is that correct? And so that's great that you're asking those questions.
Well, if you'd asked me to use polygonal in a sentence, I would have said Abraham was a polygamist. It sounds so much like polygamist.
It does.
Well, Kirsty, since we do care about being correct, I think maybe your parentheses should go after the 4 in your notation there.
It should.
Because
You are so correct.
well, we've been
There
doing
we
so
go.
much talking about distribution. Anyway, I didn't want anybody to get a wrong idea.
Thank
Good girl.
you.
Good catch, Jana.
And then also, Christy, you said we're going to sum instead of add. So is that the more precise way?
Usually, so I would say in this case, summing gives that sense of multiple additions that if I say add 3 and 3, it's the same as saying sum 3 and 3, but when I say sum in this case with the summation, I don't think I would say I would add 5n plus 1, but summing is a broader term in this case. What I am doing is adding, the operation is addition. So I'm adding 5 times 1 plus 1 plus this, but my sum is this list of terms. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm
Yes.
not
It's kind of
necessarily,
like
if I
saying,
said,
like, it's like you could say sum 3, 7, and 12
Yeah.
rather than
makes
3 plus 7 plus 12 or 3 add 7, 12. Oh.
there's all these nuances that we're all fighting through together. So thank you. Those are great questions. Well, thanks everybody for being with us today. This has been a lot of fun to learn how to play some of these games and hear your ideas, and we'll be back at it next week. Have a great week till then.
Thank you so much. You
Thanks.
too.
Thank you,
Thank
Kirsty.
you. God bless everyone.
Thanks. Bye.